Hippo saves lion cub from hungry falcon. What happened next will melt your heart. In the heart of the African savanna, where life and death often balance on the thinnest of edges, a scene unfolded that no one could have imagined. A tiny lion cub, barely old enough to stand on his own, found himself in the shadow of a circling predator, a massive falcon, hungry and poised to strike. Just when it seemed there was no hope, an unlikely hero emerged from the riverbank, a full-grown hippopotamus. What this gentle giant did next defied the laws of the wild and stunned everyone who witnessed it. This isn't just a rescue story. It's a powerful reminder that courage and compassion can come from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes nature itself writes the most beautiful tales of survival. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more inspiring stories like this straight to you. The sun had just begun its slow descent over the golden plains of the Masai Mara, casting long shadows across the grassy banks of the Talek River. The air shimmered with heat, and the sound of insects blended with the distant calls of elephants. It was a peaceful scene, until the sharp, piercing cry of a falcon sliced through the quiet. Near the edge of the river, a tiny lion cub named Kioni wobbled on his unsteady legs. His mother had gone off earlier that morning, likely hunting for food, but she had not returned. The cub's fur was a pale golden hue, dusted with the brown of dry earth, and his small round ears twitched at every sound. His wide amber eyes darted nervously between the tall grasses, sensing danger he couldn't yet understand. Above him, the predator circled. The falcon's wings cut through the sky with precision, each glide bringing it closer to its vulnerable target. In the harsh reality of the wild, opportunities like this were rarely missed. A cub alone was an easy meal. The falcon's shadow swept over the ground, passing across Kioni's back like a dark omen. From the middle of the river, a pair of eyes surfaced, massive, unblinking, and watchful. The eyes belonged to Baraka, a hippopotamus known among the local guides for his size and uncharacteristically calm demeanor. While most hippos would have ignored such a scene, or worse, chased the cub away, Baraka lingered, his huge nostrils flaring as he observed the falcon's circling pattern. Kioni let out a small, plaintive cry, a sound that carried desperation. It was the exact moment the falcon folded its wings and dove. The speed was terrifying, the shriek of the predator growing louder in Kioni's ears. Instinctively, the cub crouched, but his small frame offered little defense. Then the water erupted. Baraka surged upward with astonishing power, water cascading off his enormous back. In a single fluid movement, he planted himself between the falcon and the cub, his broad head lifting high as he bellowed. The sound was deep and resonant, echoing across the riverbanks. The falcon, startled mid-dive, veered sharply, its talons scraping the air inches above the hippo's thick hide. Kioni froze, his tiny chest heaving, eyes locked on the towering figure before him. Baraka turned his head slightly, meeting the cub's gaze with something almost gentle. Slowly, he moved closer to shore, his massive bulk casting protective shadow over the trembling lion. The falcon circled once more, clearly weighing its chances, but Baraka's presence was unshakable. With another low grunt, the hippo took a deliberate step forward, sending a clear warning. The predator finally broke off, soaring away into the distant sky. For a long moment, the savanna was silent, except for the soft trickle of water down Baraka's back. Kioni blinked up at him, as it tried to understand why a creature so unlike him, so different in every possible way, had stepped in to save his life. From that moment, an invisible thread bound them. Though no words were exchanged, something in the cub's trembling posture shifted. He no longer felt entirely alone. But the danger wasn't over. In the distance, movement in the tall grass suggested other predators might be watching. The wild offered no pauses, no guarantees. And as the last rays of sunlight brushed the horizon, Baraka knew instinctively that his decision to protect this cub would draw him into challenges neither of them could foresee. What neither the hippo nor the cub realized yet was that their paths were now intertwined by fate, and the savanna was about to test the strength of that bond in ways neither could imagine. The following morning broke with a pale, cool light creeping over the horizon. Mist curled along the river surface, wrapping the water in a silver haze. The night had been tense. Baraka had stayed close to Keone, resting in the shallow water while keeping one massive eye on the darkness beyond the riverbank. Every rustle in the tall grass had been enough to put him on alert. Every faint howl or cry a reminder of how fragile the cub's survival truly was. Keone had curled up against the warm sand near the water's edge, small enough that the shadows of reeds almost swallowed him whole. His breathing was uneven, the weight of exhaustion pressing down after a night of fear. Baraka had rarely moved, save for subtle shifts to keep his enormous bulk between the cub and the wilderness. It was the faint growl of another lion that broke the fragile calm. Baraka's ears twitched and his nostrils flared. His head turned toward the sound, low, rolling, and growing louder. From beyond a cluster of acacia trees, a lioness emerged, her golden for catching the first rays of sunlight. Her steps were purposeful, her muscles rippling with restrained tension. Keone's head shot up, eyes wide. The cub let out a sound that was half meow, half roar, an unmistakable call of recognition. The lioness froze for a heartbeat, then began to move faster, closing the distance. Baraka did not move immediately. His instincts told him to stay wary. Even a mother could be dangerous if she felt her cub was under threat. The lioness's amber eyes locked onto him, scanning the strange scene. Her cub, alive but far from the pride's territory, and a massive hippo standing guard over him. With slow, deliberate steps, she approached. Keone wobbled forward, letting out a series of small cries. The lioness sniffed him all over, checking for injuries. She licked his head, her rough tongue scraping against his tiny ears, before looking up at Baraka once again. For a long moment, the two locked eyes. It was a silent exchange, an understanding that did not require words. Baraka grunted softly, as if to signal that he meant no harm. The lioness tilted her head slightly, her breathing steadying. She had expected to find her cub dead, or worse, but instead he stood before her, unharmed, because of this unlikely savior. Their moment of quiet was broken by movement in the grass. This time, the sound was heavier, more deliberate. Baraka's muscles tightened. From the shadows, 3 hyenas emerged, their mottled fur and hunched shoulders giving them a menacing appearance. They fanned out instinctively, their eyes gleaming with hunger. The lioness immediately shifted into a defensive stance, her body curling around Keone. She growled, the sound low and guttural. Baraka stepped forward, planting himself alongside her. Together, the two predators, so different in nature, formed a wall of muscle and determination between the cub and the scavengers. The lead hyena let out a mocking laugh, pacing a few feet closer. Hyenas were clever. They knew a lioness alone was dangerous, but a lioness with a cub was distracted. And this time, there was the added question of the hippo, an unpredictable wild card in the equation. Baraka made the first move. With a sudden burst of speed that belied his size, he lunged forward, his massive jaws opening in a display of power. The ground shook as his front legs slammed down. The hyenas froze, startled by the aggression. The lioness took the opportunity to roar, the sound echoing across the river. 2 of the hyenas backed away, but the largest lingered, its yellow eyes darting between the cub and the strange alliance protecting him. It took a cautious step forward, only to have Baraka charge again, water spraying up around him as his bulk moved like a living boulder. That was enough. The hyena turned tail, vanishing into the grass with its companions. Silence returned slowly. The lioness relaxed her stance, breathing heavily. She looked at Baraka once more, her gaze softer now. In the wild, alliances like this didn't happen. Yet here they were, 2 species bound by a shared purpose, the protection of a helpless cub. Keone nestled against his mother's leg, but his eyes kept drifting back to Baraka. To him, the hippo wasn't just a savior. He was now part of his world. The lioness began to lead Keone away, back toward the safety of the pride's territory. Baraka watched them go, his deep-set eyes following every step. He should have felt relief that the cub was no longer alone, that his duty was over, and yet a strange heaviness settled in his chest. Something told him their paths had not truly separated. Later that afternoon, as Baraka rested in the shallows, he heard it. The distant roars of lions mixed with the panicked cries of other animals. The wind carried the scent of smoke. Something was wrong. Unbeknownst to him, a group of poachers had set up camp not far from the pride's territory. They weren't after lions specifically. They were hunting whatever they could sell. But when human greed enters the savannah, it rarely leaves a balance of nature untouched. Baraka rose from the water, his instincts pulling him toward the disturbance. He could feel it in his bones. Keone was in danger again. And this time, it wasn't just a falcon or a pack of hyenas. This was something far more dangerous. Something even the strongest lioness could not face alone. What Baraka didn't know was that his decision to leave the safety of the river would draw him into the most dangerous fight of his life, and that the bond he had with the little lion cub would be tested in ways neither of them could have imagined. And somewhere beyond the acacia trees, the metallic glint of a rifle caught the sun. By late afternoon, the sun blazed mercilessly over savannah, baking the earth into cracked patterns and drawing shimmering mirages on the horizon. The calls of birds had gone eerily silent, replaced by the faint hiss of wind through dry grass. Baraka moved with steady, deliberate strides, his massive frame pushing to the shallows of the river until he reached a crossing point. Each step onto the bank left deep impressions in the mud. He didn't know exactly where the danger lay, but every instinct told him that something unnatural was unfolding ahead. Hippos were creatures of habit. They stayed close to water, rarely venturing far. But this was different. The scent of smoke and the faint metallic tang in the air had stirred something primal in Baraka, something that urged him forward. Not far ahead, the pride was gathered in a patch of shade beneath scattered acacia trees. The lioness, Keone's mother, stood alert, her ears swiveling, her tail twitching in agitation. She had positioned Keone in the middle of the pride, flanked by two other lionesses. But even with their strength and numbers, unease rippled through the group. Lions feared little, but humans with weapons could shatter their confidence. A sharp snap echoed through the grass. One of the younger males lifted his head abruptly, nostrils flaring. In the distance, Keone tilted his head toward the sound, his small brow furrowed as if trying to place it. Then came another sound, more deliberate this time, a metallic click that didn't belong in the symphony of the wild. And then chaos erupted. A lioness at the edge of the pride lunged forward with a roar, but her movement was cut short by a whip-like line snapping tight around her front leg. She fell hard, her roar turning into a frantic growl as she thrashed. The poacher's snare, a cruel steel cable hidden under dirt and grass, had caught her fast. The pride scattered into action. Some charged toward the source of disturbance. Others formed a protective circle around Keone. The air filled with roars, snarls, and the heavy pounding of paws against dry earth. Baraka arrived just in time to see the glint of movement. Two men in faded khaki clothes emerging from behind the grass. One carried a rifle, the other a thick wooden club. Their faces were weathered, their eyes cold and calculating. They moved without fear, knowing that fear was the weapon they wielded best. The lioness in the snare was still fighting, but the cable had already begun to cut deep into her flesh. Blood darkened the fur around her leg. The poachers approached her with ruthless efficiency, the man with the club circling wide, while the one with the rifle kept it aimed steadily. Baraka didn't think. He charged. The ground shook with each thunderous step. Water sprang from his flanks as he cleared the last stretch of riverbank. The poacher with the rifle swung it toward him, but the hippo's speed was unlike anything they had expected. At the last second, Baraka opened his jaws wide, his deep bellow rattling the air. The man stumbled back, his shot going wild. The crack of the gun echoed across the plains, sending birds into frantic flight. Baraka slammed into ground where the man had stood, forcing him to dive out of the way. The other poacher swung his club, but it bounced harmlessly off the hippo's thick hide. The pride roared in unison, emboldened by the sudden arrival of this unexpected ally. Two male lions lunged at the poacher with the club, forcing him to retreat toward the river. The rifleman scrambled to his feet, tried to reload, but Baraka stepped forward, his massive head swinging toward him a motion that was less an attack and more a warning. Leave now, or face the full weight of my fury. The men exchanged a glance. They weren't prepared for this. The snare had been meant for a lion, not a confrontation with a furious hippo and an entire pride. In a flurry of curses and panicked gestures, they turned and fled, vanishing into the tall grass with the sound of their retreating steps fading quickly. But the danger wasn't over. The lioness in the snare was weakening, her struggles growing sluggish. The cable was cutting off circulation, and the smell of blood was strong enough to attract scavengers from miles away. Baraka moved closer, his bulk dwarfing the injured lioness. She snarled weakly at his approach, her pride instincts telling her not to show weakness, but her eyes betrayed pain. The other lionesses surrounded them, wary yet unwilling to attack the creature that had just saved them. Keone stepped forward from the safety of the group. His small voice cut through the tension, a soft, uncertain mewl. Baraka's gaze shifted to him, and in that moment, something passed between them again. Trust. He lowered his head to the snare, sniffing the steel cable. With surprising delicacy for such a massive animal, he began to nudge the ground around it, loosening the dirt and revealing the mechanism. The lionesses watched in stillness, the air thick with an unspoken question. Could he actually help? Minutes passed in a tense rhythm. Baraka pushed and scraped, the cable loosening ever so slightly. Finally, with one powerful shove of his lower jaw, the anchor of the snare gave way. The tension in the cable snapped free, and the lioness stumbled back, free but limping. She rose shakily, her leg bleeding but no longer bound. She gave Baraka a long look, half disbelief, half gratitude, before limping toward the shade. The pride closed ranks around her, grooming her fur in an unspoken act of solidarity. Keone, however, didn't move back to the safety of the group. He lingered close to Baraka, his tiny paws patting over the trampled grass, until he stood near the hippo's massive front leg. He tilted his head back and blinked slowly at him. It was in that quiet moment, after the chaos had subsided, that Baraka realized something. His life, once predictable and bound to the river, had shifted. This cub had pulled him into the heart of the savannah's dangers, and yet he didn't feel the urge to retreat. Instead, he felt a pull to stay close, to protect, to watch over him. The lioness, Keone's mother, watched this strange interaction from a short distance. She knew it wasn't natural for her kind to rely on another species, especially one like a hippo, but she also knew what she had seen. Without Baraka, her cub might not have survived the falcon or the poachers. That night, the pride stayed unusually close to the river. The injured lioness rested, her breathing steadier under the moonlight. Baraka lingered nearby, half submerged in the shallows, his ears twitching at every sound. Occasionally, he would lift his head to check on the small golden figure curled up against his mother. The savannah was never without danger, and somewhere far beyond the horizon, the poachers were regrouping. They had seen the cub, they had seen the pride, and they had marked them as a potential prize worth the risk. Baraka didn't know exactly when or how they might return, but he knew this. If they did, he would be ready, and so would the pride. The following days brought a deceptive calm to the savannah. The rains had been scarce, and the earth was dry underfoot, but the nights were cooler, the stars bright and sharp against the black sky. Baraka spent his time close to the pride now, a living wall between them and the river. He wasn't part of their family in the traditional sense. He didn't hunt, didn't groom the cubs, but his presence had become an unspoken reassurance. Keone, in particular, shadowed him whenever his mother allowed. The cub would trot alongside the water's edge, mimicking Baraka's heavy, deliberate steps with his own light-footed prance. Sometimes he would paw at the surface of the river while Baraka grazed on the thick grasses, and other times he'd curl near the hippo's side in the warm afternoon sun. Their connection had settled into something almost normal, though everyone knew that nothing in the wild stayed normal for long. On the third morning, the first sign of trouble came in the form of a sound, faint but unmistakable. Baraka's ears twitched toward the north. It was a low rumble of an engine, far away yet carried clearly on the dry wind. The lionesses raised their heads, ears pivoting in unison. The older male stood, tail swishing in agitation. The noise faded for a moment, replaced by the distant cry of a startled bird, and then returned louder. Baraka recognized it, not the sound itself, but the feeling it brought. It was the same unease he'd felt before the poachers first appeared. By midday, the pride had shifted position to a more concealed part of the riverbank, where the grass grew taller and the ground dipped into natural hollows, Baraka stood in the shallows, his eyes scanning the far side of the river. Every ripple, every shadow in the tall grass seemed suspect. Then, without warning, a sharp crack echoed across the water. It wasn't the deep echo of a lion's roar or the dry snap of branches. It was the sound of a gunshot. Birds exploded from the trees in a frantic cloud, their wings a blur against the pale sky. The Pride reacted instantly. Crouching low, Keone pressed tightly against his mother's flank. Baraka surged forward, the water churning around his legs as he positioned himself between the lions and the unseen threat. From the grass, they emerged. 3 men this time. One carried a rifle with a long scope. Another had a thick coil of rope slung over his shoulder. And a third dragged a battered wooden crate. Their clothes were dust-stained, their faces hidden behind scarves. They moved with purpose, scanning the area like predators in their own right. The man with the rope pointed toward the Pride. The one with the rifle raised his weapon. And in that split second, the savannah seemed to hold its breath. Baraka moved first. He charged forward, the ground trembling under his weight. His deep bellow rolled across the plains, a sound meant to warn, but also to intimidate. The men faltered, but only for a heartbeat. The rifleman swung the barrel toward him, and a shot rang out. The bullet struck the ground near Baraka's feet, sending up a spray of dirt. It didn't hit him, but it was close enough to sting his hide with fragments of rock. He roared again, louder this time, his pace unbroken. The poachers split their focus, one aiming at Baraka, the others circling to flank the Pride. The lionesses reacted instantly. 2 of them lunged toward the rope carrier, forcing him to stumble back. The males roared, their massive bodies closing the gap in seconds. But the men had a plan. The crate wasn't just for holding supplies. It was a trap. The 3rd man yanked it open, revealing a crude but effective cage door rigged with bait. And the bait wasn't meat. It was the scent of another lion cub, likely taken from a different Pride days before. The smell sent Keone's head snapping toward it, his curiosity pulling him forward before his mother's paw pushed him back. Baraka saw it. He understood, in his own way, what the humans were trying to do, and it made his blood surge hotter. He didn't hesitate, charging not toward the crate, but toward the man holding it. The sheer force of his movement sent a shock wave through the ground. The man dropped the crate lid in panic, stumbling backward. Baraka stopped just short of trampling him, swinging his head in a wide arc that knocked the man off his feet and sent him rolling into the dirt. The crate slammed shut, its door snapping under the force of the fall. Meanwhile, the rifleman had turned his aim on the lionesses. A shot cracked through the air, narrowly missing the injured lioness from days earlier. Her roar was one of pure fury, but the sound was quickly drowned out by Baraka's next bellow, a sound that seemed to come from deep within the earth itself. It was enough. The men, realizing their plan was unraveling, began to retreat. One stumbled, his rope catching the dry roots, but the others dragged him to his feet. They disappeared into the tall grass as quickly as they had come, leaving only trampled earth and the fading smell of sweat and gunpowder. The Pride gathered close, tense and breathing heavily. Keone pressed himself against his mother, his small body trembling. Baraka stayed near the edge of the group, his broad chest rising and falling slowly as he scanned the horizon for any sign of their return. When the danger had passed, the lionesses turned their attention to him. There was no spoken language between them, but the gratitude was clear in their eyes. Even the older males, who had eyed him warily since the day he appeared, gave him space without challenge. That night, the savannah was quiet again, but the peace felt fragile. The poachers had been driven off twice, but they were persistent. They would come back, better prepared, more determined. Baraka knew it, and he suspected the Pride did too. Keone, restless, left his mother's side after the moon had risen. He padded quietly to the water's edge where Baraka stood half submerged, his eyes fixed on the dark horizon. The cub sat beside him, his reflection small against the vast surface of the river. For a while, they simply stayed there, the silence between them filled only by the gentle lapping of water. Finally, Keone let out a quiet sound, not quite a roar, not quite a meow. Baraka glanced down at him. The cub's eyes were bright, curious, but also trusting. In that moment, Baraka understood something simple yet unshakable. This bond wasn't an accident. Fate had placed him in the cub's path for a reason. Protecting him wasn't just instinct anymore. It was a choice. And it was one he would make again and again, no matter the cost. Far to the north, beyond the acacia line, the poachers were indeed regrouping. But this time, they weren't just coming for a lion cub. They were coming for a challenge. One that would test every ounce of strength, courage, and loyalty the unlikely alliance between a hippo and a pride of lions could muster. And when they returned, the savannah itself would become the battlefield. Night fell like a curtain of ash. A hot wind pushed across the river, carrying the dry scent of grass and a bitter thread of smoke. Baraka stood half in, half out of the shallows, eyes fixed on the dark line of acacias where the poachers had vanished days before. The pride slept in tight clusters on the higher bank, but no one slept deeply. Even Keone's dreams flickered with the crack of gunfire and the hard rattle of a crate slamming shut. He woke with a start, ears perked, sensing the same wrongness that had drawn the hippo from his river in the first place. The first flame appeared where the tall grass bowed to the slope. It was small, a nervous orange tongue, but it traveled fast. Within minutes, the wind had found it, and the line of fire stitched itself across the earth. Baraka's ears rolled forward. The lionesses rose in unison, their heads swiveling, calculations happening behind gold eyes. Fire was an enemy even lions respected. The poachers used the blaze like a whip. From the dark came the cough of an engine and the flash of a spotlight, raking over grass and bodies, searching for eyeshine. A man shouted orders, another laughed, the clipped, excited sound of someone who believed the night belonged to him. The rifle cracked, then again, and something thudded into Baraka's shoulder with the sting of an angry hornet. He bellowed and wheeled, water sheeting from his hide, but his legs felt suddenly heavy, as if the river had thickened around him. Keone saw him sway. The cub's heart hammered. Instinct told him to run to his mother, to press himself under her chest and vanish into the safety of her scent. But something stronger pulled him toward the water, toward the massive shape that had once risen like a living wall between him and a plunging falcon. He slipped from the pride circle and padded downslope, the heat from the fire kissing his whiskers. Baraka's breath lengthened. His eyelids dragged. He tried to climb the bank to block the advancing line of flame, but his foreleg buckled and he sank to one knee. The dart quivered in his shoulder. Thin, cruel, tipped with syrup meant to turn the strongest bodies into stubborn stone. He forced himself up again, head high, the world tilting. Keone reached him and let out a small, urgent cry. The hippo looked down, and for a heartbeat his vision cleared. The cub's eyes were wide and unblinking, not with fear, but with a simple, fierce demand. Stay. Baraka pulled in air and held it, fighting for the ledge of wakefulness. The dart tugged at him like a black tide. On the ridge, the lioness mother roared, voice scorched by smoke. She wanted her son back, but the fire had split the ground into lanes of heat and light. The older males began to pace, searching for a break, while two lionesses flanked the pride's adolescents, shepherding them toward a safer hollow. The injured lioness from the snare limped into position beside Keone's mother, her scarred leg planting firmly despite the pain. She would not retreat. Without the cub, the poacher's spotlight pitched forward, catching the gleam of Baraka's eyes. There, someone called. Big bull. Teeth were the fortune. Hippos carried ivory, too, hidden in thick jaws, and greed made men forget what anything meant in the balance of the wild. The light slid, found Keone beside him, and paused. Take the cub if we can lion bone sell too. The fire line crackled with approval, sparks lifting like red insects into the dark. Baraka turned to face the light. His skin tightened, a drum stretched to breaking. He pulled his feet under him, dug a familiar anchor the riverbed, and felt mud instead, a soft clutch on his weight. The tranquilizer washed over him in a new, heavy wave. He dipped, nostrils flaring above water, the rest of him sinking without permission. Keone did what he had seen the lionesses do when a cub faltered. He pressed a small shoulder against Baraka's jawline, bracing, nudging, not enough to lift him but enough to tell a body in trouble that it was not alone. He squeaked, a thin, sharp sound lost in the wind but close enough to curl into Baraka's ear. From the north, another sound cut the night. The disciplined growl of a different engine and the quick, multi-voice chorus of radios. The Conservancy Rangers had caught the glint of smoke on satellite and heard the rifle reports from a distant outpost. A battered Land Cruiser bounced down a game track, red dust boiling from its tires. A second truck followed, roof rack bristling with water tanks and a portable pump. In the passenger seat sat a young American grad student on a field study, Alex Monroe, his face pale under a film of sweat. He'd come to Kenya to learn about the emotional lives of social mammals. He hadn't expected the lesson to arrive on fire. The first ranger cut the lights and lifted a loudhailer. His Swahili rolled cleanly through the heat, backed by the authority of people who protect because it is their home. Drop the rifles. Hands up. You're surrounded. Another ranger fired a warning shot high into the empty air. The poacher's spotlight swung crazily as the men broke, one sprinting for the tree line, another tripping and vanishing into a crouch, the third slipping toward the riverbank where the mud looked like flat ground and wasn't. Alex scrambled down with two rangers, eyes landing first on the Hippo and then on the tiny shape pressed against him. "The Dart!" he shouted, pointing. "M99, likely. We need the reversal. Naltrexone if you've got it." The unit medic was already hauling a case from the truck. They'd trained for elephants and rhinos. Tonight would be a first. The lionesses watched, body slung low, every muscle arched between charge and restraint. One wrong move toward Keone and the triangle of women would fall on the men without a sound. The rangers understood that calculus and kept their palms open and their movements deliberate. "We're here to help," one said softly, not to the lions but to the air, which carried every intention like scent. Alex moved to Baraka's shoulder, the dart jutting like a thorn. He glanced at the cub. Keone met his gaze with an animal's unsparing directness, and then at the lioness mother, who held herself like a coiled spring. "Easy, little king," he murmured, and eased the dart free. The medic swabbed thick hide, found the muscle with the speed of practice, and pushed the reversal home.